the Janitors Night. The ancient building of Grangewood High School loomed ominously against the pitch-black sky, its silhouette stark and uninviting. It was a typical night in late October, and the wind howled mournfully through the empty hallways, rattling the loose panes in the windows. Inside, dim lights cast weak, flickering shadows across the cold, tiled floors. The classrooms were deserted, the students long gone, leaving the school in the care of its solitary custodian, Frank Miller. Frank was an old man, his back bent from years of labor, and his hands calloused from scrubbing floors and polishing surfaces. He had worked at Grangewood High for as long as anyone could remember, though few paid him much attention. He was a quiet, unassuming figure, blending into the background like the worn-out linoleum beneath his feet. Tonight, as he made his rounds through the darkened corridors, a sense of unease settled over him. There was something different about the school this evening, something oppressive in the air that pressed down on him like a suffocating weight. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was not alone, though he knew the building was empty. His mop squeaked against the floor as he worked, the sound echoing unnervingly through the silence. Frank paused, wiping his brow with a trembling hand. The air felt thick, almost tangible, as if it were charged with a malevolent presence. The shadows seemed to deepen, shifting and twisting in ways that defied logic. As he moved down the hallway toward the old science wing, a strange, almost imperceptible sound reached his ears. It was a faint whisper, like the rustling of dry leaves, but somehow more sinister, more purposeful. Frank stopped in his tracks, his heart pounding in his chest. He strained to listen, but the sound had vanished as quickly as it had come. Shaking his head, Frank tried to dismiss the noise as a product of his tired mind. Yet, as he continued his work, the whisper returned, growing louder, more insistent. It was as if the very walls were speaking, murmuring secrets long buried beneath layers of dust and time. Frank's pulse quickened, a cold sweat breaking out on his brow. He looked around, but the hallway was empty, the dim lights casting long, eerie shadows that danced at the edge of his vision. He began to move faster, his mop dragging behind him as he hurried to finish his tasks. The sooner he could leave this place, the better. But as he reached the science wing, the whispering grew into a cacophony of voices, rising and falling in an unintelligible chorus. Frank froze, his breath hitching in his throat. The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once, surrounding him, invading his thoughts. It was no longer just a noise, it was a presence, something ancient and malevolent, something that did not belong in this world. The voices spoke in a language Frank did not understand, their tones laced with a palpable sense of dread. He clutched his mop handle tightly, his knuckles white, as the sound swelled to an unbearable pitch. The lights flickered above him, plunging the hallway into darkness for a heartbeat before sputtering back to life. Suddenly, the floor beneath him seemed to shift, the tiles rippling like the surface of a disturbed pond. Frank stumbled, barely catching himself before he fell. He looked down in horror as the tiles continued to undulate, as though something beneath them was struggling to break free. The walls began to tremble, dust raining down from the ceiling. Frank's eyes widened in terror as the tiles split open with a sickening crack, revealing a gaping void beneath. From the darkness emerged tendrils of shadow, writhing and twisting as they reached for him. He stumbled backward, dropping his mop as he fled, his feet pounding against the floor. But the hallway seemed to stretch endlessly before him, the exit growing more distant with each step. The voices rose to a deafening roar, their words incomprehensible yet filled with a terrible intent. Frank could feel the tendrils closing in, the air around him growing cold as the temperature plummeted. His breath came in ragged gasps, his vision blurring with fear. The shadows reached out, brushing against his skin with a cold, clammy touch that sent shivers down his spine. He turned a corner, desperate to escape, but the hallway twisted and distorted before his eyes. The walls closed in, the ceiling lowering until it was just above his head. The air grew thick, stifling, as if the school itself was alive, and it was swallowing him whole. In the distance, he saw a door, its surface scratched and weathered. It was not an exit he recognized, but in his desperation, he ran toward it. As he approached, the door seemed to pulse with a dark energy, its wood warping and splintering as if something on the other side was trying to break through. Frank reached for the handle, but the door swung open of its own accord, revealing a yawning abyss beyond. A foul stench wafted out, the smell of decay and ancient rot. He hesitated, fear rooting him to the spot, but the tendrils of shadow were closing in, leaving him no choice. With a final, shuddering breath, Frank stepped through the door, into the darkness beyond. The door slammed shut behind him with a resounding crash, the sound echoing through the empty hallways of Grangewood High. The school was silent once more, the shadows receding, the walls steadying. The lights flickered, then held steady, casting their dim, yellow glow over the deserted corridors. The mop lay abandoned on the floor, a lone reminder of the janitor who had vanished into the night. The ancient whispers faded into the walls, their dark purpose fulfilled. Grangewood High returned to its silent vigil, waiting patiently for the next unsuspecting soul to wander its halls after dark, when the boundaries between worlds grew thin and the horrors that lurked beyond could reach out and claim what they desired.